Alabama Tradition. I'm Ryan Fowler. As we originate out of Tuscaloosa and throughout the great state of Alabama and some of our neighboring states as we talk Alabama Crimson Tide Athletics 4-0, undefeated going into Ole Miss. We're going to be talking about that coming up in a couple of minutes. We'll actually break that game down, but we also going to spend a little time looking back at Southern Miss. Alabama continue to put up historic numbers from an offensive standpoint. When you look at Tua Tagovailoa, we'll talk about this offense, but we're also going to talk about how far can this offense really go with all these wide receivers. Will it be enough? That's the big question that everybody wants to know. Will it be enough to be able to take Alabama to a national championship and hoisting up a trophy down in New Orleans? Mart Houston here beside me, Jacob across the glass. Let's talk a little Alabama football right here on Alabama Tradition. Mart Houston, I hope you're having a great day. Welcome in.
I am doing great, Ryan, and looking forward to another great edition of Alabama Tradition.
We're going to have a little fun talking about Alabama at 4-0, undefeated. Everybody's a little bit concerned, and I think that's the one thing that we can kind of go into. 49-7, I've been doing a lot of radio interviews this week, and one of the questions that comes up is the direction of college football. How hard is it for you, because you more so than myself, you played in a smash mouth attack when they didn't average 49, 50 points a game. I think Alabama, 4 games, 200 points so far, 50 points per game for those in the back of the room. But 50 points per game, that's hard to wrap my head that's good football, but it's the direction. And I'm just curious, when you look at it from your standpoint, what is it like to adjust to the current trends in college football?
It can be tough at times to watch it. And the reason that I say that, Ryan, is unlike any other time when there's been changes, because this is not the first time there's been a revolution or an evolution of football, but at no other time has it, to me, made two of the other major parts of what I consider good football virtually irrelevant or disappear from the game. And that's what my concern is that we could have a champion that doesn't have a decent running game. And I'm not talking about downhill. I'm just talking about run when you need to run and want to run, and defense. And to me, these offenses are almost making running the ball, as well as, even when you had a run offense, you still had a passing game element, and you still had good defense. Now when I watch football, people consider good football when two teams go out and score, 49 to 48, and there was no defense play, poor tackling. It just seems to me it hurts the fundamentals of the game. I'm okay with it, and I'm being dragged along with it, accepting it at Alabama. But it's not as easy for me, because I think that you still need to have that running element at some point. And I think it's going to hurt us again if we don't find it for the red zone. Rest of the time, I'm okay.
All right, so Najee was able to rush for 100 yards. It's his second career 100-yard day. He did it against Arkansas State last year. So when you look at Alabama, did they improve in that area? Because I'm curious to hear your perspective, because we've been, I don't know if you want to say critical, but at times I guess we have been, but rushing attack. Did you see an improvement in that area, or maybe just yards might kind of mislead us a little bit?
No, I think there was improvement in it, and I think the improvement was that the coaches made a concerted effort to run the ball. We ran the ball a little bit more on first down. We mixed it up a little bit more where we didn't run the RPOs. When we ran the RPOs, we still scored as fast. I mean, to me, the reason the running game improved, and the reason I've not been one of those that didn't think Alabama couldn't run the ball. I thought that Alabama had no commitment to run the ball, and Nick Saban sounded conflicted about whether he's going to even push to have that. He says he knows he needs it, but dog, we're so good at passing. And what I saw in the Southern Miss game was a commitment to run the ball. Go back and look at the number of carries that the guys got, Ryan. That's why our running game was improved. It was because we ran it. We ran it a little bit more. He had more carries this game than he's had, meaningful carries when it mattered. And he's running better. I think Najee Harris is a guy who's getting back into the swing of running the ball. He finished runs better. My disappointment was that Brian Robinson looked like the guy that's trying to hit the home run now. He wasn't hitting the hole as hard. And I think that comes from not getting enough carries, Ryan. So you try to make something happen with the ones you get. And maybe that's what's been Najee's issue.
So do you think he's trying to do too much? Because I know you're a huge fan of Brian Robinson. Being from our area here in Tuscaloosa, Hillcrest is literally just a couple of miles away from where we're located as we originate here out of Tide. 100.9 in Tuscaloosa. You can follow us on the app and listen to us all different ways. We do this as we talk Alabama football. But Brian Robinson, when you look at Brian, is he trying to hit the home run every single play?
I would not have said that before last week. Something changed this past week. He didn't look like the same guy. He looked more like a guy trying to pick the hole and find that big explosive run versus just taking what they give you 3-4 yards and then all of a sudden you break the long one. So he looked a little different running the ball, and I don't know what caused that or why. It looked like they flipped roles. Najee was hitting the hole and like getting up in there and finishing runs a little bit better than what I've seen him do, and a lot like I've seen Brian Robinson do.
And so let's go to Nick Saban, because he talked a little bit about the offensive changes when you look at the University of Alabama and kind of the offensive segue. And I'm going to tie this into what Tua Tagovailoa told us after the game. This is the best coach in college football, talking about the offensive changes for the University of Alabama against Southern Miss as a game 49-7.
I don't think it's just this conference. I think it's football in general. I think, used to be a lot more closed formations. Now everything is spread and open. I think space play is much more important than it used to be years ago. People throw, a 2-yard pass on an RPO and it turns into a 70-yard play. So the game has just opened up to where, horizontally and vertically, you got to cover the entire field. In the old days, I don't think it was really that way. And I think that's, created a lot more explosive plays on offense. And people who have good skill players and good quarterback have a chance to really, take advantage of some of those things, and it makes it much more difficult on defense. So I think the combination of those things probably has changed our league just like it's changed football in general.
And so you listen to Nick Saban, pretty much what Nick Saban is saying. We asked him if he was a big, not the offensive. We've kind of asked ourselves all week, is this a Big 12 football team in Tuscaloosa? Now, a lot of people don't like, because they sort of take it as an offensive term. Maybe it's not, but and Nick Saban, this is 2 weeks in a row that he's kind of said something about the offensive direction. When you talk about playing wad ball, Nick Saban's not happy where we're going, but you're kind of, have you ever done something that you didn't want to do and your parents or someone else was just dragging you? That's what Nick Saban is doing in college football. We're dragging him. We're pulling him with everything we have to go the direction of the current game.
I heard Houston Nutt on a local station here in Tuscaloosa, and this is what he said. He said exactly what you're saying, sort of that same sentiment. But you know what he said? He said, I guarantee you money, Nick Saban in every practice has 2 or 3 running plays that he has those guys running, and he said, I don't care what we do, we better be able to run these plays anytime we need to and want to. And that made me feel a little bit better hearing a former college coach going, yes, Nick Saban is reluctantly going there, but you better believe Nick Saban understands that there's times at some point in the season, and this is what he said, Ryan, he didn't say that somebody was going to stop Tua. I thought it was interesting, because I said we're going to run into a defense that's going to stop Tua. He said one day you're going to come somewhere in the season where the wind's blowing, the rain's falling, something is going on that makes that ball just a little bit off. And all of a sudden you equalize a great player like Tua. And I thought, wow, that is such insight into what I was thinking about a team stopping Tua, but a team in combination with rain, weather, just a player being missing, Tua being a little off with his knee or his ankle, anything. And he said, I guarantee you he has 2 or 3 run plays that he is making sure that they can execute when they have to.
Well, we asked Tua Tagovailoa following the game, 49-7. I say we as a media room in Tuscaloosa. We asked Tua Tagovailoa a very simple question, and it was his response. We asked him how much more of this offense is left when you look at Tua Tagovailoa. And you can tell, a lot of times you can read the nonverbals. It's the reaction. And he was pretty much telling us that there's a lot more left in this offense. And then you have to go back and ask the question, if this offense is doing this now, what is the ceiling? What is the ceiling of Tua Tagovailoa in this offense that's in Tuscaloosa?
Well, Ryan, I can tell you, I think that Tua's right. Because if you go back and look at what Sark has kind of revealed the last couple of weeks. Against South Carolina, he added the passing game to the running backs, but it was the down the field passing game. This week, what about that touchdown pass that Najee called? Remember that? That looked
He's
a
getting
lot
involved, and I love this side of that.
Yeah, that looked a little bit like how we beat Auburn a few years ago with Roy Upchurch. Remember?
Sure.
Running back out there in the flat, rubs off the tight end coming across with the receiver. I think they're going to add that. And then how they get better, Ryan? If we start running the ball and keep running the ball and get more effective, you have to play action pass. You add the short passing game. You add to the running backs. And all of a sudden, where do you go? And then they even throw in the Wildcat with Slade Bolden. So I think that there's a lot more, as he said. Now I'm starting to feel a little bit better, dragging and kicking and whatever. Someone told me Martin said, just relax. Think of New England in a hybrid offense that New England runs. That the running backs are not an afterthought in the passing game. They are primary receivers, and they use that to replace the run. And we have a Tom Brady-style college quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa. That's it, breathe. So I'm trying.
Well, that's what I was talking about. When the stress relieving technique of earlier, I'm having a hard time with it. I mean, I'm being honest here as a therapist, a therapeutic session. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this brand of offensive identity.
You know what I finally came to, Ryan? Somebody's going to be the first team to win without a dominant running game.
Might as well be us.
And a dominant defense in this new era of spread out. Somebody's going to get to the point that they're so good with this version of college football and offensive football that they're eventually going to break that glass ceiling and win a national championship. And so I'm going ahead and getting on the wagon and saying it's going to be Alabama in 2019.
Go ahead and make a prediction. All right, we're going to come back. We're going to talk more about this. We'll set the stage. We'll talk some Alabama Crimson Tide football. Some other elements that we haven't discussed. Injuries, Deontay Brown. We'll talk about it next in Tuscaloosa, right here on Alabama Tradition, as we cover the past, present, and future of the University of Alabama here with Alabama Tradition with Mark Houston and Ryan Fowler.
Bacon Brewing Q is back Saturday, October 5th from 2 to 8 p.m. at Government Plaza in downtown T-Town. Bacon Brewing Q is presented by New Belgium and That Tire, with participating sponsors including Pepsi Buffalo Rock, Southern Ale House, and Dotson's Burgers. Come downtown to sample food from over 30 of Tuscaloosa's best restaurants and over 60 craft beer. Visit the Adams Beverage Craft Beer Pavilion. This event will sell out.
Do you have over $10,000 in federal student loans? You may qualify to have your entire student loan forgiven with one free call. If you are a teacher, police officer, first responder, or work for a nonprofit, then you may qualify to have all of your student loans forgiven. The Student Guides want to give you free information on all the current programs that can help. The sooner you call, the faster you can save. Get the maximum loan forgiveness and loan reduction available. Plus, find out in the first free call all the relief programs you may qualify for. A loan forgiveness specialist is standing by to answer all of your questions for free. Stop worrying about student loan payments. Call 800-933-3470. Wipe out your federal student loan debt. Call now. 800-933-3470. 800-933-3470. Discover the top student loan reduction programs that are still available to you for free. Call now. 800-933-3470. 800-933-3470.
The flagship station for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports, Tide 100.9, and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
side. Najee to the left of his quarterback. Here now with play action fake. Tua looks, has a man wide open. Henry Ruggs has to turn around to make the grab. He does. Kicks it into a high gear, and he is gone. Touchdown, Alabama. 74 yards.
When you listen back at that play and you listen to Eli Gold and John Parker Wilson, Rashad Johnson on the call, I don't think we realize the athletic ability that it takes to be able to slow down the speed of a 4.25 guy. Slow down, wait just a nanosecond on the football, and then fly by when you talk about Henry Ruggs. Really amazing when you listen back at that. We're going to listen to Nick Saban coming up here in just a couple of seconds about Nick Saban and Henry Ruggs. But what an amazing play for this young man. And maybe not from Lee High School there in Montgomery, when you look at a guy that has really came on the scene and almost made himself a first rounder, a high projection wide receiver.
Yeah, someone asked me today which guy would I take, a Jerry Jeudy or Henry Ruggs, and I told him it's based on what you already have on your team. If you're looking for a guy who can get open, who doesn't need help to get open, that calls for a double team, you take Jerry Jeudy. But if you got a Julio Jones on one side that's going to get double teamed, you put a Henry Ruggs on that other backside, baby, I feel sorry for him. It's lights out for that guy. I mean, this guy for Southern Miss, Ryan, probably ran a legit 4.4.
Right.
I mean, it was running full speed, chasing
And
him.
it was so amazing. It was like just someone in a fast car just pulling away from a guy that's in a Pinto.
You know what? I was almost prepared to give you a hard time about Tua underthrowing him. And then he made Tua look like a brilliant guy again. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean,
Sure.
not
No,
Tua
100%.
needs any help, but I'm just saying that
Giving me a hard time.
Yeah, I'm just saying. You know, it's hard not to underthrow Henry Ruggs on that deep of a ball. But the fact that he didn't just slow down, Ryan. He turned his body and caught the ball. And the guy was closing on him.
Sure.
And it was like the
Just
guy
like
was
he-
within a hand, like reach out and touch him, and it was like, phew! And it was like the guy, it actually looked like me chasing down, a wide receiver, like, well, this is over. I'm not going to quit. Because it looked like the guy stopped, even though he really didn't.
All right, so when you listen to the Alabama, we talk a lot about the rushing attack. We're very happy with the passing attack in Tuscaloosa. Let's go to Nick Saban talking about Henry Ruggs, the talented wide receiver out of the state of Alabama playing for the University of Alabama. Henry Ruggs already having an awesome season, but a continuation of that. Nick Saban talking about Henry Ruggs.
Well, I think that we like to get all our guys involved early in the games. I think that, some of the plays that these guys make, I know you all look at it like, okay, we put this play in so we could throw the ball to this guy, but you throw the ball to the guy relative to what the defense does. So, one of the plays that he scored on early in the game was a double pattern, which was kind of a setup play for him. But the other play was an RPO. We could have just as easily handed the ball off as throwing it to him relative to what the defense did. So I think, our receiver core in general, ability to catch and run with the ball, including Henry Ruggs, is, one of the assets that we have on our team. So, we want all those guys to get featured the best we can.
And so when you listen to Nick Saban talking about Henry Ruggs, and I'm sure by now you've seen the video of the rock, paper, scissors, would Nick Saban sort of piggybacking what he's talking about with that double pattern? And he said that was a pretty much design play that he talked about the RPO touchdown. But it's rock, paper, scissors on who's going to get the hot route in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, and that it's laughable, but it really shouldn't be. And if I was another fan base, I would be upset by that. You know what I mean? Because you think it comes across as arrogant. But what they're really communicating, Ryan, is we have 4 legit wide receivers that are number 1 wide receivers for virtually any other team in the country. And one of them doesn't even get... Jalen Waddle has hardly been mentioned this year, and the guy is a legit first all SEC talent at receiver. And so that's why they have to do that, to the point, because the reality of it is they know we get about 4 or 5 plays if we go out and we're passing the ball against inferior opponents. And one of us is going to take it to the house. So which one is it going to be when we get that RPO and they bite on it? They know it's coming. And so I get it. And like I said, if I was another fan base, I probably would be offended. But I'm not.
All right, so the University of Alabama, we're going to get Deonte Brown back this weekend. Deonte Brown is a mauler. He's a guy that was one of our best blockers. When you listen to Deonte Brown, now we've got audio coming up a little bit later about Nick Saban talking about Deonte Brown, because it's not just a audio for Nick Saban talking about Deonte Brown. It's a rest to anybody that's got a starting position. You better not be complacent, because there's probably a guy. That's one of the great things about the University of Alabama. Deonte Brown, will he make this offensive line better, in your opinion? Will he get a chance to play? Obviously, he's going to have to earn the playing time, as Nick Saban reminded us. But is that a guy that you could see being a part of this offensive line?
Well, if Deonte Brown comes back and is Deonte Brown that was suspended, the easy answer to that question is yes. What he brings to the running game far outweighs what we may lose to the passing game. My question becomes, Ryan, who do you move? Who do you shift? Because you cannot, to me, you take Dickerson out of that offensive line right now, and we lose identity, any identity of being nasty. And to me, you don't gain anything really if you just swap those two. If you just swap, because that's what he played, was right guard. So if you just swap those two, no, it's going to be where we've been, and we may be worse off with the passing game, because Deonte Brown is not a great pass rusher, and it appears that people are trying to put pressure on Tua up the middle. I think we're going to see a shift of somebody to center, and possibly even 2 people moved in, meaning that we could see Deonte Brown at left guard and Emil Ekiyor at center. We're going to have to do something with the center position. Deonte Brown's going to help us make that. And then I'm going to be excited, Ryan, because that's when we're finally going to see what the offensive line like.
All right, so as you're sitting there saying this, as I hear the Nick Saban, and we'll work to that coming up in the next segment with Nick Saban talking about Deonte Brown. I think we've got it right now. Why don't we play this? Because as you're sitting there saying that, Martin, I could almost add to what you just said. Let's let Nick Saban do it. We'll come back and react to it. This is the best coach in college football talking about Deonte Brown that we're talking about here on Alabama Tradition.
We were planning for every player on our team. This guy's got to beat somebody out if he wants to play. I mean, nobody's entitled to play.
Breaks soon afterwards.
Gets in shape. He does what he's supposed to do. He shows that he can play better than somebody else that's playing. That's the plan. Just like it's the plan for every other guy on the team. So, that's really kind of up to him, not up to me.
I love the psychology of Nick Saban. I was told one time by an All-American, a 2-time All-American at the University of Alabama, that Nick Saban is the #1 coach in the history of college football, but he's also the #1 sports psychologist in the country too. And what he's doing is he's setting it up where there's no disruption of team chemistry. Because if somebody happens, let's say that what you're saying with Chris Owens, let's say Chris Owens is benched. Then Nick Saban is pretty much saying, okay, come back and earn your spot. That if we do put you on the side, or whatever position, if there's another offensive lineman that has to take the bench, Nick Saban is pretty much saying, your position is never safe at the University of Alabama.
Yeah, I think that was a multifaceted conversation. Sure. I think he was talking to future players that want a position if you earn it. He was talking to Deonte Brown himself and saying, I don't care what the media has been saying about how much better we're gonna be when you get back. You're gonna have to earn the right back. And he was talking to us as media people that guys, it doesn't happen because a guy has played before. I am going to play the guy that shows that he can help this team win, and doesn't matter how much you talk about it. So, but I think the biggest thing he was sending a message, Ryan, to the rest of his team, especially coming off of last year where he said it got to the point where players felt entitled. and he doesn't want that to creep back in, and so he want to make sure that they know that if Deontay Brown plays, it's because he earned it.
All right, we've got to work into the segue because we're offensive. I mean, see, we were talking about being jealous of all the attention. We're guilty of it because we're giving all the offense the attention. We've got to spend some time talking about Alabama's defense because it continues to get better. We'll highlight some of those areas and begin to preview Mississippi. The Rebels, Land Sharks, the Black Bears coming to town with an identity crisis. We'll talk about it coming up right here on Alabama Tradition with Martin Hughes and Ryan Fowler as we originate a mile and a half away from the capstone of the University of Alabama. We'll move in that direction coming up next right here on Alabama Tradition.
Davis Discount Tire. We've been saving people money for over 50 years. Now at Davis Discount Tires, save even more. Right now, get up to $100 back on 4 select Goodyear tires.
Oh, yeah.
Always save on tires at Davis Discount Tires.
Yeah, I saw it. I was on the sideline. They went crazy, and we don't have that. We've not had that in this defense in a while. Who's been emotional?
The next time you're hungry, satisfy your craving at Portland Pizzeria on Highway 43.
Yeah, well, the guy we wanted to be going with had DJ Delknight came in.
And if we're going to set up Christian Barrymore, I think we've got a Nick Saban. Hey, Jacob, do we have Nick Saban on Christian Barrymore?
And smoky flavor
Jacob.
love. They give you New York style pizza without
Jacob.
delivery is available.
He may not have.
6969. It's better at Broadway Pizzeria, Highway 43 North in Northport.
You're listening to Tide for the world, and we are too. Download the Tide 100.9 app right now in the App Store and Google Play, and take the Crimson Tide everywhere you go.
I think the two guys that probably on defense that has really, sort of picked up the leadership, part of it, setting a good example, really encouraging some of the young players. Anthony Jennings and Xavier McKinney have, those two guys have tried to, pick up some of the skills and have had really good production. But I think what you don't see is how they're impacting and affecting, other players on the team who probably need their support. And it helps the younger players have confidence when they feel like the older players are confident in them.
All right, so you listen to Nick Saban talking about Anthony Jennings. He also highlights Xavier McKinney. Minutes after Nick Saban said that inside the Malmore football building, I went to Xavier McKinney. We had a chance to talk with him for a couple of minutes, and I asked Xavier McKinney, I said, let me ask you about the leadership role that you're taking, because it's obvious. We can see it on the football field. And I said, okay, Xavier McKinney came into the University of Alabama. He's busted his butt. He gets respect from his teammates. It's showing up on the football field.
Success took 12 years in the making, et cetera. You hear people say stuff like that. Well, Xavier McKinney is that leader, and he had to transition to it and accept that role, but he's been doing the things that he needed to do to build the trust of his teammates. He's been leading by example. He's been the guy that's been in the meetings, making the right choices. And Saban's talked about that a little bit, about how you do the right things when you're supposed to. Then when you go back to the other guys, you're able to have influence and impact. And that's what we have with Xavier McKinney. He's done the work the previous years that he's been here, and now he's that guy on there that's unquestioned, I think, having the best year outside of our wide receivers and Tua on this team.
Well, Xavier McKinney is a guy, and Anthony Jennings, I know you can look back, but I mean, he's also having a great season, gets back, and you could see there was a play, and I'm not going to try to highlight a negative because anything can happen on that football field, but his responsibility was the primary back coming out of the backfield. And he had a little bit of a slip, and the back kind of got behind him. It was the Southern Miss scoring drive. And so Anthony Jennings was able to, and this is why I know he's getting close to 100%, because he was able to make up the difference. He almost slid down, but then he almost made the play. And that was after having a poor reaction, slipping down, and he's almost getting back. If he can get back to where Alabama used him against Clemson in New Orleans a couple of years ago, to that dominant of a player as Anthony Jennings showed us down in the Superdome, Alabama's defense will only get better as these two players and other players behind him will progress.
You know, C.J. Watson, one of our listeners and viewers, and a lot of people are asking that question, Ryan, do we need elite defenses in today's college game? And I don't think you need elite defenses like we had where you hold people to 6 or 10 points. But you need to be able, when you get third downs, you have to get off the field. You have to have good red zone defense, and you have to have guys who are game changers. And that's what you're talking about with Anthony Jennings. You need to have guys that when you have to get a quarterback sack to end a drive, when you have to be able to stop or stuff a short yardage play, you need players that you know, if it's one play, they can be the ones to make it. And I think Alabama's just, with so much youth, we're having to develop those guys. Remember Pete Golding saying this summer, when he had the 2 linebackers and DJ Dale and other healthy players, he said, we're going to have to create, not find depth. He said, create depth. And I said, he just said they're going to, so that means that they're going to manufacture, meaning, hey, we're going to give guys certain responsibilities, only certain amount of the playbook that they can execute. And he says that in this summer, that one time we got to talk to him, and now that's even more critical than it was when he made that statement this summer.
All right, so the Christian Barmore. Everybody wants to talk about Christian Barmore, and we have Nick Saban talking about Christian, but let's go back to the end of the game. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we go back to South Carolina? Christian Barmore gets the targeting call, which was not targeting. SEC officials, Greg Sankey, Steve Shaw, which I'm a big fan of, you missed one. That was not targeting. But the young man bounced back, and when he got his opportunity, played well, and the end of the game against Southern Miss, all 3 consecutive plays was made by Christian Barmore. So he had 3 tackles consecutive on the final 3 plays of Southern Miss, and the reaction is something that you took notice of from his teammates of Christian Barmore.
Yeah, I wasn't at the game, but I had people, it was so obvious how they celebrated around him and the emotion that was exhibited by the defense and his teammates. Just that's something we're missing. To me, defense is emotional. You know what I mean? It has to be controlled, but it's emotional. And I don't know that we've had that in a while, Ryan. I don't know that if you go back and look at last year's defense, this year's defense, do we have that emotional, leader or that guy that makes everybody else get more hyped, yet they still play under control?
How much is that we're just not comfortable? I mean, in other words, we're not comfort with our own skin. We're not comfort with our own defensive schematic thing. In other words, we're still learning. Because how many of us go in and we take a test? A test is every Saturday inside Bryant-Denny Stadium or wherever.
Yeah.
And you got that test anxiety a little bit.
Yeah.
That may be where this defense is. They're not comfortable right now.
And that would explain last year's defense as well, what you just described. A lot of new guys and a lot of new pieces, a lot of new different voice calling the defenses, different coaches coaching you, different expectations from that coach, even though you're playing to a standard. All of that goes into your mind. This is something we hadn't even thought about, Ryan. How one coach substitutes versus another. When I make a mistake, one coach lets me play it out, and the other coach pulls me out. And all of that's going, and they're learning all of this. So yeah, I think it very well could be that our defense is a little nervous or apprehensive, but emotional players like Barmore, Christian can be the difference that can help push this defense over the hump to an elite defense, or at least a really good one.
This is Nick Saban talking about Christian Barmore as he makes a difference at the University of Alabama. Coming out of Pennsylvania, making a nice segue to the University of Alabama. This is Nick Saban talking about Christian Barmore.
Well, we certainly are pleased with the progress that he's made. He's got ability, he's got initial quickness. The challenge for us has been, to get him to do the things that he needs to do relative to the rest of the players on defense. You can't have guys that if they're supposed to slant to the right, slant to the left. That's when the ball goes, out the gate. And He's learning that that's a real critical part of what he needs to do to take the next step as a player. And we certainly need for him to do that. And we're encouraged by the steps that he's made, to do that. So hopefully his role will increase for us in the future.
All right, Martin Houston, take that and explain. And I always aggravate you guys as players and coaches. Y'all like to speak fancy language there. Break that down for us where we'll all understand it.
In other words, he has the talent to play at an elite level and to be a starter on this defense. However, he's not transitioned from his high school days where he was a free runner, able to do what he wanted to do within his defense, still make plays, coaches be happy. Here, if you make a mistake, if 10 guys play the right defense and one guy doesn't at the college level, it can be a touchdown or, as Saban says, out the gate. And so what that's telling me is that he was not very disciplined in his approach to playing the defense that's called. In other words, when you read something, Ryan, when you read that guard or that tackle, they may be making you read that to get you to pursue. And your job is, say for instance, he's shaded on the nose, on the center, and the guard pulls. They may be having that guard pull so that you chase that guard, and your responsibility was a slant to the right. And when you chase that guard, you go out and actually leave a hole wide open, and you would have slanted right into the hole.
So what's that telling me, and I'm just trying to analyze what you're saying, is he's got everything else.
He has he's just not very disciplined. And
once he gets that,
he's gonna.
I mean, Martin Houston, he was unblockable.
He is clearly better than the backup guys of the teams he's played against. Well, that wasn't even the backups against South Carolina. That was their starters.
Sure.
And they could not block him. And he's been unblockable for the last couple times he's been in the game.
The only way you can get him down is calling an illegal targeting call, right? Which is SEC officials.
I think we see him early this week.
Christian
against Ole Miss.
Barrymore.
I think we see him early this week.
Talking about Pete Golding a couple of minutes ago, building depth. We're going to break down Ole Miss. We'll give you some final predictions. Jacob, Ryan Fowler, Martin Houston right here on Alabama Tradition as we cover the present, future of the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Here's some inside information on the automotive business.
I'm also going to kick this on
Manufacturers the same. In other words,
side of things. Martin Houston's going to join me coming up in a couple of minutes. We do a new show that has started out of T-Town. It's Alabama Tradition. We certainly want you to invite you to connect with things that we're doing. And if you're in a local spot in Tuscaloosa or maybe throughout the state of Alabama, you can find us on YouTube. We're going to be doing that. We're going to be doing a lot of fun stuff. Martin Houston, myself, we're going to talk a lot of Alabama football. We label this as Alabama Tradition. Present, future of the Alabama Crimson Tide, and we talk about the past as well. We love to talk Alabama football. We're going to break down Ole Miss. This is the final segment. This is a radio edition. We're also tying in YouTube and Periscope and different things, so we're going to be talking a lot of Alabama football. We got a couple of seconds left, and we're going to be right back into our segment. You'll have a chance to hear that, and then we'll get into our final analysis of Alabama and Ole Miss and predictions as we look at 37.5-point difference according to experts in the desert. We'll get into that here coming up in just a couple of seconds. Stay with us. Alabama Tradition, Martin Houston and myself right here.
That was actually recorded on YouTube. And when I have a pause, then you can do it. That's what we can like that.
We're excited about the SEC home opener, here this Saturday on CBS, and it's an opportunity to play, what could be arguably the best team we've played so far this year. I know Ole Miss has had a tough loss last week, but they've, played well in a couple games and had a couple good wins, and quarterback's playing really well for them. Backup quarterback came in and played even better, in the game last week. They got a really good runner. They got some really good skill players at receiver. Got good specialists, good return guys. Their defense has been a lot more aggressive this year in terms of creating negative plays, sacks, tackles for loss. those types of things. So this is a well-coached team, and this is a team that we've struggled with some in the past that, we're certainly going to have a great week of preparation to be able to play well in this game.
All right, so there it is. Nick Saban talking about the Mississippi Land Sharks, the Black Bears, the Rebels. They'll bring 3 different mascots in the University of Alabama. But according to Las Vegas, it's not going to be enough. This line opened up at around 32.5. 32.5. It immediately went to 34, 34.5, and now it's up to 37.5. And we're sitting here earlier in the week. This line may have a chance to go even higher. Martin Houston, let's talk about this from a couple of standpoints. Nick Saban saying this is one of our biggest competition. He would probably say that if we're playing anybody. But Nick Saban giving us some coach talk. Are you buying what Nick Saban is saying here from an Alabama standpoint? The biggest opponent is the Mississippi Rebels.
Well, it's the biggest opponent being that they have actually placed themselves as number 5 on our schedule. As far as talent, I think the South Carolina game would be our toughest opponent up until this point. They're playing better defense, ironically, than they have in the past, Ryan. So it's possible, but that kind of feeds to the point that we have a really weak schedule if this is our toughest opponent.
So Alabama going in number 4, but when you look back at Ole Miss, everybody's talking about the disappointing side of things when you look at California. And you look at California of maybe the Pac-12 missing a call. The game was played in Oxford. One of the things that you generally do when you play one of these non-conference Power 5 teams, a lot of times it doesn't happen with the non-group of 5, the group of 5, but it does happen when you bring a big team in. A lot of times the agreement is you'll bring your own officiating. According to most people, Pac-12 missed one over in Oxford, Mississippi on that final play.
No doubt. When you look at that, you have to at least review that. I know it gives Ole Miss a timeout that they didn't deserve, but it also did not give a proper opportunity to do something that they've added to the game, and that was a touchdown, or at least deserved to be called a review and at least looked at. Ryan, it looked like the kid's arm fell in the end zone. He was in the end zone when he got hit. It looked like he got spun around, and the ref looked like he spotted it based on his right arm, and the kid actually had the ball in his left. So I thought it was a missed call.
All right, so when we segue into this game, when you look at Alabama's defense, we have come to kind of expect that Ole Miss is going to up-tempo a lot of things. They're going to hurry it up. And when you talk about a defense that even had communication trouble against Southern Miss, now the score is not going to indicate that because they only gave up 7 points, but the small games within the games, the small plays, when you talk about communication issues, they got to clean that up because things are going to get faster for Alabama when you go up against some of these teams, because they're going to know that, when you expose and you say, hey, we're weak at this, we're not as fast on our communication and our reads as much as we should be, you're going to have to correct those because you're going to continue to see it over and over and over. And I'm sure Ole Miss will bring that, or at least they'll try to bring that inside Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday.
I agree. You have to try to find whatever you can to equalize the game. Spreading out and going fast is the way to do that against a team with superior talent. And Rich Rod's been around for a while, former head coach at a couple places, now the OC at Ole Miss. I expect him to pull out all the tricks, but they still have a far superior talent level, Ryan, in my opinion, over in Ole Miss. And so I see that Alabama will have some potential communication issues, but the young freshmen are getting better, and the more familiar they get, the better they will be at calling those plays.
All right, so Vegas has this at about a 37.5-point difference here. We're talking Alabama tradition. This show originates out of Tuscaloosa. Every week as we talk more Alabama football, this is Mark Houston, a second leading rusher in the 1992 National Championship team. He does the Mark Houston Show mornings in Tuscaloosa at 6 a.m. I do the afternoon, the p.m. drive from 2 until 6. We call it The Game. We talk a lot of Alabama football. But 61 points, according to the experts in the desert, that's the over-under. 37.5 points. As we begin to kind of break this down, so maybe plays that you think that will identify the strengths of this Alabama football team against the Rebels. You think this is a big line for an SEC. I know it's a home game. That's a huge spread when I'm pointing at it. And I know The folks on the radio side of things cannot see what I'm pointing at, but 37.5 points is gigantic in the Southeastern Conference. Now, I'll give you an example. And you say, well, how big is it? All right, Clemson played Charleston this past weekend. It was a 42-point line. 42-point line between Clemson and Charleston. Clemson played 111 players in that game, by the way, but we're not going to talk about Clemson. But that line was only 42. This is an SEC game, and Vegas thinks it's a 37.5-point difference, according to the experts in the desert.
And I think that Alabama covers that, Ryan, unless we get to the 111 players. And let me tell you why. I still think Nick Saban has a thing for Ole Miss. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Well,
there's some teams
he doesn't forget, does he?
There's some teams that I believe coaches get on a coach's bad side or under their skin. I think Ole Miss did that. I think they made a big deal about beating Alabama. And I think Nick Saban, if there's anybody that he'll run up the score on in his run up the score version, I think it's Ole Miss. So I think Alabama more than covers the 37 if we end up playing 75 players versus 111.
So do you think this game, well, Alabama, and I could kind of see it a 50 sort of margin for Alabama, and then you look at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is going to score some points. You're not going to be able, with this many youngsters on the defensive side of the football, you're not going to shut these guys out to 7 or 10 points. They're probably, as Martin Houston and I like to say a lot of times at lunch, 17's kind of the new shutout, right?
Yeah, and I would give them somewhere in the 13 to 20 point range is what I would expect out of Ole Miss, and I expect Alabama to get up into the 50s and possibly 60 with this team But Ole Miss has not scored on us since the first play of last year. So we almost have four quarters of, shutout football against this team, and maybe we can continue that streak for 2 or 3 more quarters.
All right, Jacob, the guy that produces and makes all the correct calls behind the scenes. Jacob, let me make you a part of the show here. Alabama and Mississippi, the Vegas experts think it's about 37.5, 61 on the over-under. Where do you have this game, Jacob?
I think it's 44-14. I don't think they cover.
Oh, look at there. So you're saying take the road dog here in the Rebels coming into Bryant-Denny Stadium.
Yeah.
All right.
He doesn't even have him getting to the 61. He has him as an under.
Well, I think we've seen, and we had a caller call in early on the previous show. We're not scoring in the fourth quarter. And there's bound to be a late score for Ole Miss, so 44-14.
All right, we've got a couple of minutes, and I think we've got about 2 minutes before we're going to end the show right here on Alabama Tradition. Is that because I think we can segue into what he's talking about, is that because Alabama's trying to be conservative? Or because they put a lot of things on film, but they've really not done a lot of that in the fourth quarter. Now, they try to get a lot of guys reps. They've got to get Mac Jones, got to get Talia Tagovailoa ready, but offensively, maybe being a little conservative later in the football game.
Well, the reason I think we're going to have to get Mac Jones more reps, and I think he will come in and play more of our regular offense. And I think if Talia plays in this game, I think they're going to know, Ryan, because this is his 4th game. If he plays, they're going to play him so that if they have to bring him out of that red shirt, they know a little bit more about what he can do. Or they won't play him at all.
That's a great point because I really haven't spent a lot of time thinking about that. But, I mean, that is one of those that they're looking beyond and saying, if you go beyond 4 games, then we're kind of believing that you can be a part of our plan.